Welcome, Wargamers, to the unstable and shifting corners of the mortal realms, because today we are talking about the various coalitions that are vying for power and control over the Prime Dominion. For those of you who have no idea what I'm talking about, check out the videos that I did last week. I've linked them down below regarding the upcoming Animosity narrative campaign event. It's a worldwide thing, totally free, and it's a great deal of fun. Well, in that video, I explained that you can join one of 6 what are called coalitions to assert your control over a region in Hysh known as the Prime Dominion. And by your participation in this narrative event through, writing lore, painting miniatures, playing games, of course, you get to add to an ever-evolving narrative along with gamers from around the world. So as stated, there are 6 coalitions that you can join, and I want to make this abundantly clear up front. The coalitions are factions for the sake of storytelling. They're not split up by army or grand alliance. Any army can join any coalition. And you, as your army's warlord, of course, get to decide why you did that. You could be a character in Overlord's captain, establishing a new trade route. Yeah, we'll help you in your little petty war as long as we get exclusive trade rights. Or you could be a Khorne warlord who's just looking, what's the faction that I should join to get the most skulls? It could be Gloomspite Gitz wanting to procure the most bottles. That's just the thing that they're always out for. It could be, necromancers seeking a spell or a weapon. It could be a myriad of things. And if nothing else, you just feign ignorance and try to take advantage of all of these different leaders of these different coalitions who are just desperate for help. Now, each of these coalitions has a page of lore, and you can find that on the Animosity site, but there's 6 of them, so I'm going to keep the nitty-gritty details to a minimum, and this is meant to more give you a taster for the various factions trying to control the Prime Dominion. So basically, I'm going to read you the lore blurb for them, as well as some notes that I pulled out that I thought were extremely interesting or makes these factions very unique. Now, the Prime Dominion itself is divided into 6 unequal territories called Satraps. And yes, I realize I pronounced that wrong in my last video, but the correct pronunciation, Satraps, are just the synonym for the coalition that you can join. The first one up is the Idrilik. Led by a Treso Red Hand, the Idrilik are the most warlike of all the satrapies. A harsh meritocracy where only skill secures advancement. They trace their heritage to the Tyrannic hemisphere of Hysh, meaning they're all about, Tyrion being a warlord on the battlefield. The Idrilik believe they live or die by their strength at arms and will never back down from a fight or a slight. Now, the Idrilik is known as the Satrapy of Valor. They've participated in nearly every major conflict that the Prime Dominion has had, both internally amongst each other as different satrapies, try to covet different lands of others and share resources and take what they want, but also external threats from the few factions outside of the Prime Dominion who have found them. And the best way to kind of sum up their mentality, because, honestly, because any army can join any coalition, really what we're trying to do is get a sense for their mentality, their flavor. And if I had to sum that up, it would be iron sharpens iron, and they intend to be the sharpest. And what I mean by that is they're constantly pitting themselves in battle, refining their martial prowess, always seeking to be like the ultimate warriors. They are also the most welcoming to outsiders, provided that they can put up a good fight and do so honorably. However, this life of aggression comes at a severe cost because they suffer more attrition than others. They just keep throwing themselves into combat. They are the second smallest of the satraps, at least in terms of numbers of ready warriors. But those that are here are incredible marvels of slaughter on the battlefield. Now, their leader, who we mentioned, Treso Red Hand, is pretty cool. While others use politics and diplomacy to gain riches and favor and resources and, kind of build your culture up in such a way, she sees the usefulness of those things only in the extent of how they pertain to battle. Getting allies for a war, making sure that no one crosses you or tries to take what's yours in, a political deal when it should be settled honorably in a fight kind of a thing. Now, the next satrapy that we're going to talk about, or coalition, is the Teklan deck. Led by Dariel the Resplendent, the Teklan deck are the most prosperous of all the satrapies. They rule the breadbasket of the Prime Dominion and want for nothing except perhaps more. The Teklan deck's seemingly endless resources have made them a powerful trading partner throughout Hysh and beyond. Now, the Teklan deck are known as the Satrapy of Plenty, and frankly, these are the spitting image of pre-Spirefall elves, okay? They command some of the most valuable and fruitful land within the Prime Dominions, which is a very limited space. It's a very limited amount of real estate. Their resources are nearly endless, their crops are bountiful, and the money is flowing. They really value things like trade and culture and art, as they have achieved enough wealth and comfort to explore all of those things. They tend to see themselves as the true heart and soul of the Prime Dominion because of their value of culture and civilization, which, I guess to a small extent makes sense. If you have, outside visitors or emissaries coming into the Prime Dominion, these are the guys you probably want to put forward and be like, yeah, make them feel comfy, let them know that we have a very deep cultural history and all these kinds of things. So I understand why they feel that way. Now, their leader, Dariel the Resplendent, is everything you want an elf to be, particularly if you're a fan of, classic elves, I guess I could say, kind of like in the old world type thing. And I say that because he's a leader by example. He favors personally the arts and the sciences, and he really has a vision for what his people, meaning the elves of the Prime Dominion, could be. And there's this idea that with just enough, self-discipline and focus, the flaws that led, I should rather say, to the Spirefall can be avoided. And in his mind, there's another golden age of the elves on the horizon, but of course that will only come to fruition if he is in charge. The next satrapy are the Selene deck. Led by Renaya Oathsworn, the Selene deck are the most embittered of all the satrapies, a hard people well acquainted with even worse hardship. They are formed from the broken dregs of the Lumineth society, cast adrift by the Spirefall. Looked down by other satrapies, they shelter unwanted refugees from across the realms and plan for the day they will take back what should rightfully be theirs. Now, the Selene deck are the Satrapy of Dreams. While many of the refugees that made up the initial settlers of the Prime Dominion, went on to form these different satrapies and these little tiny regional governments and stuff like that, as with all things, whenever there's a big upheaval or chaos or societal problems, many individuals fall between the cracks when those kinds of changes happen. This satrap is a culmination of all those who didn't fit in with the others, the outcasts, the wretches, the poor, the dishonored, people that no other one wanted, whether it's here in the Prime Dominion or just abroad from the realms. They have carved a mini-nation unto themselves, and the other satraps look upon them with disgust, saying that they've given up the nobility of the elven way, that they're not quite, up to standard or spec for what an elf should be, but in truth, these are just folks who started losing during the Spirefall back in the Age of Myth and just kind of kept losing. Lands are taken from them, they're downtrodden, they're forgotten, they're not given the opportunities that other satraps have. However, hope still remains that the scales will tip in their favor, and the Satrapy of Dreams will be recognized for what they are: equal, respectable, and to an extent, even dangerous. You want to have some edge if you want to survive inside this world. Now, their leader has a really cool story. I do suggest you go over to the website to fully detail it, but apparently she was supposedly killed when other satraps came forcefully and claimed land from these guys. Again, she was killed in this madness, and all the other satraps are like, yeah, she's totally dead, and all the people here are like, no, she's not dead. Regardless of which story is true, someone bearing that name still sits upon her throne. So they have this next level of intrigue where it's like, amidst all the hardship that's happening, all of the people on both sides have to ask, what happened? Right? Is she she's still noble. She fights for the underdog. She's trying to gain a respectable foothold in the Prime Dominion. But secrecy and distrust are what set off the catalyst of these events to have all these satrapies fighting one another. So distrust is a curse unto itself here. Now the next one is the Ruular. Led by Caratus Lightbringer, the Ruular are the most cultured of all the satrapies. Home to the youngest, brightest minds in the Prime Dominion, they've rejected the old ways of Lumineth society in favor of forging a new and innovative path. The Ruular draw fresh ruling and philosophical ideologies from other cultures, making them a rising power to be reckoned with. And it should go kind of without any surprise that this is the satrapy of innovation, and these guys are fantastic. They see the mortal realms not as they are, but as they could be, which on the surface sounds incredibly optimistic, and it is to an extent, but there is a dark side to that as well, because it's that arrogance thinking that, one, you have the power and the right to change the world as you see fit, that got the elves in trouble back in the Spirefall. Now, that's there, but the positive side is still incredible, because they bring out the best of what it could be to make the world a better place. Engineers, wizards, farmers, and potters are all treated on equal level in society in terms of respect and validation, but they all have to be constantly innovating, inventing, finding new ways to get the most out of life. They don't adhere to the societal, structure or pageantry of the past. These people want results, and they want to make the world a better place according to their, preferences of how they deem, quote-unquote, a better place. Now, their leader is everything you'd expect from people like this. On one hand, incredibly optimistic, he has a vision for the future, a lot of hope and potential, and on the other hand, he can be seen as an idealist, and his head in the clouds, all flash, little substance. Which one is true has to kind of be tested with the fires of war, unfortunately. Now the next satrapy is the Dorniar. Led by Ulsadrad the Deathly, the Dorniar are the most learned of the satrapies. Thinkers and philosophers all, they're devoted to studying history and scrying the past for prophecy. Although slow to anger, once they have been roused to wrath, the Dorniar descend upon their foes with all the crushing finality of an avalanche. And with that being said, this is the satrapy of Serenity. They value knowledge and history above everything else. Their people secured the most written records and histories of the elven folk before the Spirefall. They have literally the most information about their own history, and in their minds, he who controls the past controls the future. And to some extent, all of their citizens, because of this, are scholars with a complex educational background that dives headlong into magical studies, arts of war, philosophy, everything like that. And as the name, the satrapy of Serenity would make you think, they value peace and an even-keeled mind, very reasonable people. However, when they are roused into a battle, they become a very particular type of enemy, where they're constantly learning from their foes. They'll study them like a hunter studies their prey, acting only when logic and wisdom dictate that a killing blow can be delivered. They'll just be the patient hunter waiting for a mistake, and then they will seize that opportunity like a viper. And their leader is an interesting one. Said his name was Usildrad the Deathly, and he spent nearly 5 centuries on his throne. Now, this throne that he sits upon is very special. It's known as the Throne of Light, one of the few remaining artifacts of the pre-Spirefall times. It's literally a throne carved from the Realmstone of Hysh and manipulated to safely channel immense power to whoever sits upon it. And in this time, this 5 centuries, he has withered and become very frail, but the power of the throne has allowed him to basically have pure illumination. He's incredibly wise, his arcane might is incredible, his schemes that he comes up with are complex and deep and very even measured. And all of this is built upon the intense study of him and his people as they use history and education to enact their will within the Prime Dominion. And finally, the last of these satrapies are the Aurinar. Led by Aiden the Auric, the Aurinar are rumored to be the wealthiest of all the satrapies, boasting coffers twice as deep as any 2 of their rivals. However, no one has actually seen this incredible wealth, because the people from this satrapy live in a strictly frugal existence. Having lost everything in the Spirefall, they have amassed material goods for the inevitable day the apocalypse revisits them. And this is the Satrapy of Wealth. And this is actually a really cool idea because initially I was like, oh, okay, they have all the money. Right? They could just throw money at their problems. And the answer is, of course, yes and no. They have more wealth than the other satrapies, of course, but it's because they've cultivated this society taking around just enough. Right? They're not each individually rolling in cash. They live very simple lives with meager food and clothing, and all the wealth that they generate can go to enacting their will. They're saving up for mercenaries, for resources, for weapons, because they are preparing for whatever's going to happen next, right? They're just always like waiting for the next catastrophe, and they want to be prepared, so they're stockpiling all these things. Well, to the other satrapies, they can look at this and be like, you guys are a bunch of misers. You can't achieve the glory and the lofty, excessive heights of art and culture without using that wealth that you're accruing. And they accuse the R&R of being hoarders and that kind of stuff. Which on one hand is absolutely true. On the other hand, when things destabilize, like say, 6 different satrapies all trying to vie for power, those coffers that can hire a lot of mercenaries are really, really useful. And their leader is an interesting person for that same reason, right? The leader of the wealthiest satrapies shows up to these, mass meetings of all these leaders dressed up almost like a commoner, but his people love him because he sees their devotion as his power source, not the money. So he's always trying to do what's right by his folks. And those, friends, are the 6 satrapies, the 6 coalitions that you can join. Again, any army can join any one of them. Do whatever you'd like, kind of build your story into what would your warlord do? Why would they join this person to the exclusion of the others? And so I kind of wanted to end this episode with just a brief discussion on why I think that this is cool. This is fantastically well written. And again, I very much abbreviated things. Go check out the Animosity site for more detail. But I feel like each one of these satrapies, these coalitions, drives home what an elf is meant to be. They have these heights of grandeur and knowledge and arts and science and money and optimism, but that's cursed to failure with the infighting and the greed and the oppression and societal status and more. You can look and see how they spread to every corner of Hysh and were a megapower for some time. They constructed the grandest wonders of the realms. But you can also see the recipe for failure in each one of them. Remember, in a pre-Spirefall city, all of these different kinds of elves would have been mixed together, right? They only broke up by interest like this in the Prime Dominion. So mixing all these flaws and outlooks is a recipe for disaster and political intrigue for sure, and the very things that brought the elven race low. There's no obvious good guys. There are just a lot of shades of light and dark. And again, that's why it's awesome, so that you can join one no matter what the motivation for your character is, or what Grand Alliance they're a part of. So friends, thank you so much for hearing me out. I love these different, perspectives on elven kind and how they can represent just the absolute best of the mortal realms and also the worst of their culture and that kind of stuff, the big pitfalls that led them to their own self-destruction. So I hope that you join me and many, many others in contributing to this year's Animosity campaign. We're going to have a great time, and I'm going to be doing weekly lore videos. It does start on the 14th, and so you have till then to kind of decide what you want to do. You don't have to start building or painting or anything yet. Just kind of jump into the Discord and meet some folks and have a good time, and they'll point you in the right direction. So thank you so much for watching and listening, and I'll catch you next time. Happy wargaming.